Hello, fellow humans, and welcome back. So last time around, we've seen HTML, the basic concept of HTML, tags, etc., and how to use them in order to build like a very basic web page. So now that that is done, the thought that remains is, okay, it's a web page, it's nice, fantastic, but it looks kind of bland. It's just white and it's just black text on a white background. And although there are many different tags that are used and it is formatted differently, it's still pretty bland. So let me, in fact, just as an example, pull up a web page. So there's few heading tags and a paragraph tag, maybe a text, and then maybe an unordered list, and then just a marquee tag here, and it's cool and all, but it is very bland. Like, maybe what if there was a way to style this? And for that is why exactly we need to learn CSS. So CSS, or cascading style sheets, is basically a language for styling the HTML page. While HTML is used to structure the web page, CSS is used to make it look nice, make it look nice, and also arrange it and align the items properly. So for that we use CSS. So yeah, similar to HTML, CSS also is something that I believe you should not waste time for learning for years, but rather focus on the concept of how it works, and then look up the various properties or things whenever needed. So let's start with CSS. Okay, that's not what I intended. Anyways, so CSS. How do we write CSS? Now we'll start the same way. Where to write? Again, any old text editor, Notepad, VS Code, etc. will do. Next, where to display this? Link it to the same HTML page and open it browser. So that is basically the logistics required to write CSS. So you just same old text editor like your Notepad or VS Code, etc., and then you link it to the HTML file that you have already written, and then open it in the browser in order to display your HTML web page with all this new added CSS stylings. So there are basically three ways to write CSS. Let us look at them. Alright, so let us look at the ways to write CSS. There are basically three ways. First is inline CSS. Inline CSS is basically where you, let's say this is our HTML file, and I want to style the heading. So I will declare an attribute called style, and inside that style I will write my CSS code. Let's say color equal to red. Okay, and then if I just refresh this, now it has become red. So this is basically CSS code that I've written inside this, but don't do this. This I would generally not recommend. It just makes your code completely messy. So do not write inline CSS. Inline CSS is wrong. Then next is style tag. So in the head, you can declare let's say a style tag, and then inside this you can write CSS. Or the best way to write is, which I believe is, an external style sheet. So basically we declare a completely new CSS file. Let's say we call it some style.css, and then we link it in our HTML file. So let's say the syntax to link an external style sheet or an external CSS file which is in the same folder is as follows. So you type link, and then rel basically denotes the relation. So relation is style sheet, and you remember the href attribute from a tag, so which basically denotes the link. Now if you're on VS Code or something like that, it'll automatically show up here. So /style.css, and then close it. It's just a self-closing tag. So now this style.css is linked to this index.html, and we can write all of our CSS code here. Now, more importantly, why I would prefer writing in an external style sheet is, this same style sheet you can link to index.html as well as other HTML pages that you write. So we'll write our entire CSS in this external style sheet. Cool. So now let us look at the syntax of CSS. First, we will need something known as a selector. Selector is basically to which all elements that this style should apply to. So let us say the most simplest selector is basically your element. Let's say h1 tag or element or tag. So you have your h1 tag or your p tag or your marquee tag, etc. Let's say I want to apply a style to all the h1s of my HTML. So I'll write h1 and then space. We will use flower braces and then an enter. So inside these flower braces we declare the style. So now h1 and then inside the flower braces, let's say I want to change the color. So color is one attribute, color, and then colon equal to whatever value I can put here. So it can be like an RGB value, let's say hash 0000033 is some random color, I think. So 0000FF is blue basically. So if I want red, I can write FF0000. So that will give me red. And then once I've written the style, I'll put a semicolon. So the entire syntax of CSS goes like this. You have a selector and then an attribute and then a value for that attribute. You can also just directly use the names. So if you just type red, you will get red. And then once we refresh here, you can see that the heading is red. Or let's try something different because I already shown that in the inline. So let's just refresh and you can see the heading is green. So this applies to all kinds of all the elements which are h1. Now what the problem is with using elements, let's say I want the heading to be green and then I've used h1 somewhere else here. So let's say one more h1 I've used and this is some big text. Okay, and then now if I refresh, here you can see some big text is also become green, but I don't want this to become green. I want only the heading to be green. Okay, so then here we basically come to the concept of class and ID. Let us first look at ID because ID is ID is simpler. So let's say h1 space. This is our main h1, the heading, right? So I'll type ID attribute here. ID is equal to, and I'll give this one a ID. Let's say the ID for this h1 is some main heading. Okay, now I save it and then instead of h1 here, I'll type, since this is an ID, we use we prefix it with hash main heading. Cool. And then if we refresh, you can see this heading with the ID main heading, this h1 is green, but this h1 is not. So that means this styling is being applied only to the main heading and not all h1s, only to the ID of main heading. And which has the ID of main heading? H1. That's it. Now ID is completely unique. Only one tag or one element can have this ID. Let's say I want both h1 and p to have a color of green, or let's say I want hash ID main heading and p to have the color green. I can write, let's say, p color green, but this is repetitive, right? I'm writing it once, I'm again writing it again for a separate one, and then it will work. Like the heading has become green, the paragraph has become green, but that's not what I want. Another way is you can chain these together, chain the selector chain you can do. So you can put comma p here. So now this color green will apply to main heading as well as p, right? So you can still see it works. But let's say I don't want to do that also. Then we get the concept of class. So okay, if I type p id equal to main heading, save it and then run it, this works, but this is technically not encouraged because ID is supposed to be unique. We will see this once we get to things like JavaScript, which is an actual programming languages. So let's remove ID. Let's call this, instead of an ID, a class, right? A class called main heading, and then let's give this class to P as well, the main heading class, right? Right, just main heading class. Now, since this is a class, and if we refresh this, okay, so now that we've given h1 and p both a class of main heading rather than an ID, if we refresh it here, it's black, but it should be green, right? The heading and paragraph. Well, that's because the syntax for ID selector and class selector is different. So for ID selector, we use a hashtag, but now since both of them are class, we use a dot. And now if we refresh, we can see that these both are green. So those are like the three types of selectors. You can directly select the element. You can select a class. You can give an element an ID and select that, or you can give an element a class. So let's just to demonstrate, to keep that demonstration alive, let's give this one an ID, big text. Okay, and then we'll access this also here, hashtag big text, because since this is an ID, big text, and then color equal to some red. Okay, so we can see this class of heading text, or class of whatever was this, class of main heading color green, and class of big text is given color red. We end it with a semicolon, we don't forget that. So those are the ways of accessing. And there is one more special selector that I'd like to cover. Let's say something like the star. The star is basically universal selector. It selects all the elements in the entire web page, including the body. So body itself is also another element. Now we have seen color. So color is basically affecting the foreground or the text, let's say here and here. But what if I want to affect the background? So there is a new attribute for that. This is called background color, and then let's say some black. Okay, now if we save this, and this is remember, this is universal selector, so it's applying everywhere. Now if we refresh this, the entire site has become black. Now we can also change the color of the default text everywhere. So color is equal to, let's say, white. So it's like basically like a night mode. So the default color of all the text has become white and then black. And then it's also important to understand that this is being applied to every element. But when an element has a particular class, then this is being overridden by this. So color green is more important than that. Now let's say if H1 has an ID of big text as well. So which is more important? Is the class main heading more important, or is the ID big text more important? So if our heading is green, then the class is more important. Or if our heading becomes red, then that means the ID component is more important. Let's see what is the preference given. And as you can see, even though it has a class for the green color, since it has an ID of big text, the ID takes precedence, and then this becomes red. So if we just remove this big text, then it'll go back to being green. So that is the importance. So if you have to note down the importance, I don't know what are the comments in CSS like, but if you want to note down the importance, let's say we'll just write it here. So if you want to remember the order of importance, it goes like this. ID is given first preference, then class, then the element, or the element / tag. So that is the order of importance that we need to remember. Cool. Alright, so now we have looked at basic color attributes, and then the importance, and then class and ID and stuff like that. Let us look at a few more attributes. So let's say we want our heading to be centered, right? So that's like a text attribute called text align. So we write text -align equal to colon center. Now what this does is, it basically, whatever has the main heading class, which is these two, they'll be to the center. So if I refresh this now, these have been automatically centered. So that is another attribute. And then we can always look up more attributes as well. And just like we've done with let's say just like we've done with HTML, one of the best resources is W3 Schools. We go to W3 Schools and go to CSS, and then there are many kinds of attributes that you can look up. Let's say colors, backgrounds. You can add borders as well, borders. So let's say rounded border and stuff like that, dashed. And there are many attributes, and then many values that you can give. So there are a lot of things that you can play around with, copy, paste, and play around with, right? Another thing that I would maybe try is, okay, let's just remove this unordered list for the time being, and let's add a button, right? Button, and then li, no, not li, sorry, let's add an a tag linking to something. A tag href google, no, sorry, the entire url. www dot. Okay, so now we've added a button with an a tag, and if we click on it, it'll go to google.com. So let's just type some text for it, google.com, and then we'll refresh it. Okay, so we have a button here called Google, which takes us to google.com. Nice, it's nice and all, but it looks kind of weird. So let's say we want to style this button, right? So we go to style.css. Let's give this button a class. Now, since this is the only button, we can just type button and get it over with. But still, I'd like to just to practice the concept of class. Let's give it a class called Google button, right? Google button. So now we can access this here, dot Google button. Cool. So now let's see what we can do with this. It looks kind of small, so let's increase maybe the font size. So its font size is an attribute, and then we can give it, let's say 24. We can give it in pixels, 24 pixels, and if we increase it, okay, the size has increased. Now let's say we are seeing that there is an underline, and then if we click and then come back, there are some artifacts left behind by the a tag, right? Because the a tag is what is inside this button, and it looks kind of weird. Let's say we want to remove all this text decoration that is done by the a tag. The a tag is inside of this .google btn. So how do we access the nested a tags? So we don't want to affect all the a tags on the page, just the one inside the Google button. So we will write .google button space a, and then apply whatever styles we need. So actually, to be honest, we are technically removing the default styles. So text decoration is the type of style that's applied here, and then we basically specify none to remove the default underline. And if we refresh this, that underline is gone. It's just a normal thing. And let's say we want the button to be a little bit rounded as well. So Google button, I believe, okay, so this is a fantastic opportunity. So I don't know what is the I don't know how to reduce the Google button roundedness. There is some property called as border radius, but let's say I don't know that. So I go to Google, I go to CSS, and then I can't find it, let's say, directly in the W3 school. So I'll just go directly and Google rounded button CSS, right? So I type like this, how to create rounded buttons in W3 schools. Fantastic. So 2px, 4px, 8px, 12px, 50%. There are different types of rounded buttons. Now, how do you do this? Well, it's given here. So yeah, this is just common styling. Here, the styling is given for each type of button. There is a property called as border radius. And then you're giving some value, let's say 2 pixel, 4 pixel, 8 pixel. And this is more of like a trial and error. You give the value, you refresh and see if you like the value or not, if it looks good enough or not, and then you continue. So let's say border radius 8 pixels. I want to try that. So for this button, let's say we give a border radius 8 pixel. All right. And see, it's nice, but let's say I want it to be a little bit more rounded. Let's say 20 pixel. Okay, now that looks too much like an oval. So let's go back and maybe let's say 12 pixels. Fine, that looks good enough. Now let's say we want to change. Now let's say we want to change something else. Let's say the color and background color. So let's say the background color is white, and let's say the color is blue. Okay, so this we might need to give it for the a tag as well, right? Because that's what is actually inside it. Cool. So the background color is white and the color of the text is blue. Let's not provide any color of the text here because there's no text inside the button. The text is here inside the a tag. Cool. Now we click on this and it goes to Google. So this is basically it. You know, the classes, IDs, accessing them, accessing separate elements, accessing elements inside of an element with a particular class, like this do Google button space A. So those are basic concepts, and then there are various kind of attributes that you can look up and access in order to change. And we have seen the process of how to look it up and how to do it. I'd like to leave you with one more extra this thing, that is basically states. So what is a state? Basically, if you are hovering over an element, that is one type of state. If you're not hovering over an element, that is another type of state. So let's say dot Google button colon hover. So now when I hover over dot Google button, I want to change some styles about it. Let's say I want to make the background color blue. Okay. Now ideally this is not the most efficient way to do this, because I have to do it twice for Google button and Google button A. Normally you should be doing it only once. But we'll cover all that kinds of things later whenever whenever we have a look at the box model and stuff like that. So if we do blue and then color white, so we are basically inverting the background color and the text color whenever we hover. So that we do it by colon hover. Alright, so now if we reload this, same button, but once we hover, you can see immediately that there's a change. The button becomes blue and the text becomes white. So you can see the change. And you can make this change look a little bit better also by adding a thing known as a transition time. I believe it's called a transition time or transition duration. Yeah. So let's just add it to the A tag for now. Transition duration. Yep, transition duration. Let's say 0.2. And then, okay, that's a bit too fast maybe. Let's say 20. 2000 milliseconds. So that's basically 2 seconds, right? Right. And then if we refresh, so you can see the difference. So yeah, if you just add it to here as well, it will look better. Yeah, there you see. So that's maybe a bit too much. So yeah, you can play around like that, whether on hover states and then on different kind of states, let's say clicked or visited, and there are other states like that. So you can play around with that as well. So yeah, that's about it, I guess. This is basically like an intro to CSS, intro to cascading style sheets, how to use it, how to link it to your HTML page, how to access the various kinds of attributes, and stuff like that. And you can also look up way more attributes, and in fact you can even learn all these concepts on your own, as we have just showed, because the syntax is same. If once you get the concept of class and ID and accessing the element from your HTML page and making changes here to that element, if you get that concept, then fantastic, because the rest of it is same. The core concept, just like HTML, once you get the concept of tag, you can research about how many ever tags you want and then just look them up and put them in your code. Similarly, once you get the syntax, once you get the core concept of that, let's say the selector, the attribute, and then the value of the attribute, if you get that core concept, you can look up many attributes and you can give many types of different values, and then as per your taste, you can change up the look of your website. So yeah, I guess that's about it. I hope I was able to convey the basic idea behind or the concept of CSS.